3 weeks into my freshman year of college, I transferred dorms because I believe I was about to be murdered by my own college roommate. I'm not going to say which college this was at. His name was Daniel, not his real name, but it fits him somehow. We met move-in day, shook hands, did the usual small talk. He seemed quiet but normal enough, and his side of the room was immaculate from the first hour. Everything arranged with a precision I noticed but didn't think much about, because some people are just neat, and I figured I'd gotten lucky. The first week was fine, mostly because I was barely in the room. Welcome week means you're out every night, meeting people and sleeping badly and coming back late. And every time I got in, Daniel was already in bed with the lights off. I assumed he was just introverted and settling in at his own pace. The second week, I started noticing things. His textbooks were always in the exact same order on his desk, spines perfectly flush with the edge, identical spacing between each one. Every morning, he made his bed with a level of precision that went well beyond tidiness, smoothing and adjusting until something only he could perceive felt right. And every night before bed, he'd check the door, lock it, turn the handle and pull it 3 times, then the other way and pull 3 times again, and sometimes start the sequence over from the beginning if something hadn't felt right. I mentioned it once, kept it casual, asked if the routine helped him sleep. He looked at me and said very quietly that it needed to be done correctly. Then he went back to his book. Around the end of that second week, I also started noticing that my belongings were being moved while I was out. Not taken, not damaged, just repositioned. Water bottle on the wrong side of the desk, chair at a slightly different angle, shoes neatened into a parallel pair by the door from wherever I'd kicked them off. Always subtle enough to second-guess myself the first few times, but consistent enough eventually that I stopped being able to explain it away. I never said anything because I couldn't prove it and didn't want to start something I had to live inside of for the rest of the semester. About midway through the third week, I came back from a party on a Thursday night, maybe midnight, a few drinks in and tired. I was getting into bed in the dark when my elbow caught Daniel's desk and sent a stack of his textbooks crashing onto the floor. I froze and listened to his breathing, and it didn't change. So I gathered the books up and stacked them back on his desk in a rough pile and got into bed and fell asleep, thinking nothing more of it. I woke up a couple of hours later to movement in the room and opened my eyes to find Daniel at his desk in complete darkness with no lamp on, rearranging the books I'd knocked over with a concentration that was almost uncomfortable to watch. He was adjusting them by increments so small I couldn't understand how he was perceiving anything in the dark. Picking them up and setting them down and picking them up again, his breathing slow and deliberate like someone performing a task that demanded everything they had. I watched for a few minutes through half-closed eyes without making a sound. And eventually, the exhaustion and the drinks pulled me back under, and I fell asleep again. What woke me the second time, I can't explain. There was no sound that I registered, no particular noise. I just came awake suddenly a few hours later, with every part of me alert in a way that sleep doesn't usually leave you. I opened my eyes, and Daniel was standing at the side of my bed. Not the foot of it, the side. Close enough that I could have reached out and touched him. He was holding the geometry compass from his desk, the metal kind with a sharp pointed end for drawing circles, and he had it open in his hand with the point angled downward, and he was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before, and hope I never see on anyone's face again. Not angry, not distressed, just absolutely fixed and still in a way that made the whole room feel like it had stopped. I sat up fast and said his name and asked what he was doing, and the sound of my voice seemed to snap something loose in him. He looked down at the compass in his hand and then back at me and said very quietly that I had moved his books and that he had put them back correctly and that I had undone everything. and that this room had never been right since the day I moved in, and that he was so tired of fixing things that I kept breaking. I told him to put the compass down. He looked at it again for a moment and then set it on my desk and then looked around my side of the room, and something in his face just went. Some final thing he'd been holding together gave out entirely, and he started going through my belongings with both hands. Not methodically, he just started throwing things off my desk onto the floor, pulling my books off the shelf, throwing them and upending my chair, and going through it all with this running commentary under his breath about how I didn't deserve order, and how people like me were the reason nothing could ever be right in this world. It was honestly crazy. I got out of bed and grabbed his arm to stop him, when he shoved me hard enough that I hit the wall, and that's when I began fighting him back, as reasoning with him was clearly out the window now. Eventually, I managed to open our door and shouted into the corridor for someone to call campus security, as Daniel had picked his compass back up and was clearly trying to use it on me. Security eventually came, and it took 2 of them to get him calm, and someone from Student Services arrived to escort him out of the dorm building with them, still talking quietly to himself on the way out, never looking at me. The room looked like a complete bomb site. It was a huge mess. My side of it specifically, my stuff across the floor, books open and spine bent, desk chair on its side, everything I owned that he'd touched over the previous weeks now scattered without any of the care he'd previously applied to moving it. I slept in a friend's room later that night and submitted the transfer paperwork the next morning and moved out 2 days later. I heard through campus that Daniel was suspended due to my statement of him holding that compass as a threat, and I never heard anything further than that. I think about the compass a lot, about the way he was holding it when I woke up and the angle of it and the look on his face before he heard my voice. I've told myself various things about what he was actually doing standing there in the dark by my bed in the middle of the night, and some of those explanations are more comforting than others. I mostly go with the comforting ones, but not always.